had a moment to read the quote on this page, and it gets at a key idea we're here to consider: the ways in which assessment, particularly formative assessment or assessment as learning, is a powerful tool that can be used to affect teacher instruction in the classroom and ultimately student learning and achievement on summative exams. So I'd now like to introduce our panelists. My name is Elisa Rafter, and I'm a Program Development Manager for Agile Mind. I work on our middle and high school mathematics programs. I'm thankful to have with me today our two panelists. Kathy Cook is the Online Course Programs Manager at the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin. She leads the teams that develop curricular and assessment resources in middle and high school mathematics. Joining us also is Nick Romagnolo, Special Assistant for Mathematics and Curriculum Instruction at Newark Public Schools in New Jersey. He's here to give us insight into some of the assessment practices his district has been using. So here you see our agenda for today. Kathy's going to first share what the research is telling us about effective formative assessment. Nick will then describe how his district highlights assessment as part of an overall strategy preparing their students for success with their rigorous mathematics standards. And finally, we'll take a look at a formative assessment resource from Agile Mind that uses technology to deliver rich standards-based items that can be used by educators to gather real-time data on student learning. And I'm going to go over a few housekeeping tips before we pass it over to Kathy. Remember to please keep yourself muted to avoid distracting the other listeners. And you're always welcome to use the chat window to send us some comments or any questions. And note that these are private and only we will see them. So this webinar is being recorded and you will be able to revisit it at a later date. We will run the webinar for approximately 45 minutes, and after that we will have time for a question and answer session at the end. And at a few points during the webinar, we're going to ask that you answer a brief poll question to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our attendees. So on that note, here is our first poll question. This question is going to display for about 20 seconds so that everyone has a chance to fill out the poll. You can respond by selecting on your best choice, and we encourage everyone to participate. Okay, thanks for the feedback. So it looks like a lot of the group is very interested in learning about some of the best practices happening on the ground in a district. So we're definitely going to be spending time learning about that on the webinar today. We're also going to be addressing the other topics, and we'd welcome the opportunity to cover anything in more detail during individual conversations at a later date. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to share with us about key elements of effective assessment.
Thanks, Elisa. Hello, everyone. Across the country, states are implementing college and career-ready standards to foster the mathematical rigor that students need to be successful in higher education in the workplace. We know that if students are to acquire the knowledge and skills described in these new standards, it is crucial that districts attend not only to instruction, but also to their assessment practices. This statement that's highlighted here speaks to two interconnected criteria for effective formative assessment: the quality of the assessment task itself and the quality of the formative assessment process within which that task sits. Too often, educators consider only the first criteria and neglect the second. So as you think about your own district's assessment practices, consider this chart. We ran across this in a recent issue of EdWeek and thought it was a useful organizer to focus our discussion around today. Each column in this chart represents a type of assessment. So let's look at the last column first, because during the last few months we've been hearing a lot about state-level standards-based assessments. We would suggest that if a district takes the kinds of actions described in the first three columns of this chart and make those part of an overall formative assessment strategy, then success in that last column will come as a matter of course. So the first column, which here is called formative learning assessment, you may call it other things, but let's just use that as the organizing label, suggests actions taken by students. Self-evaluation and metacognition, analyzing the work of others, journaling, and peer review are all activities in which a student might engage to identify his or her own growth and to identify strategies for improvement. The second and third columns address actions that are taken by educators. So in the formative diagnostic assessment category, teachers might ask questions, observe students working on a task. They might administer written quizzes designed to identify gaps or surface misconceptions. That third column, benchmark and interim assessments, are what might be administered in order to measure students' progress against a set of uniform learning objectives or standards. These three types of assessment activities should not be thought of as discrete. They could all happen simultaneously, depending on the setting and the task. But in order to make these activities most effective, these things must be true. The assessment task you use has to be designed in such a way as to elicit the kind of information or student actions that you're seeking, and the information from these assessments has to become available rapidly enough that action can be taken for a student to change a learning strategy or for a teacher to alter instruction in response. Assessment does not become formative until someone does something with the evidence that is elicited by the assessment. And that evidence has to become available in a timely enough fashion to do something with it to make a difference. Now, we all know that technology can certainly deliver on the promise of timely data. Here's an example of a report that can be delivered by technology. The danger is that these data might be treated only as a progress check falling in the benchmark or interim assessment category without mining the data for how they might inform future instructional moves. So think back to that organizer on the last slide. Students can engage in formative learning assessment by considering their own responses to the item, talking with peers about possible misconceptions, and perhaps identifying strategies to improve their understanding on a concept. Teachers can engage in formative diagnostic assessment by engaging students in a rich discussion of this item, perhaps by sharing with the class the most commonly chosen incorrect answer and having students talk with a partner about why that might have been chosen. By listening to these conversations, teachers might be able to identify some next steps in instruction to combat possible misconceptions or misunderstandings. Technology can certainly deliver on the promise of readily available data. What we've been working on at the Dana Center here for the past few years is also how to help technology deliver on the promise of worthy tasks that can deliver that meaningful data. Our work here at the center is focused on designing high-quality mathematics assessment tasks for middle and high school that are worthy of students' time and that deliver meaningful data to guide student learning when it can make a difference for instruction. And I'd like to show you an example of that. So I'm hoping now that all of you are looking at this item on my screen. I want to give you just a moment to read through the item, get a sense of what it's asking students about. So you'll notice that this item addresses fairly traditional descriptive statistics content related to the center and spread of a data distribution. However, the item assesses students' understanding of these ideas in a novel way. Rather than just calculating and reporting the measures from a given data set, students must engage in a problem-solving task. They have to sort through the information provided to them and apply their understanding of the interplay among each of these different statistical measures in order to be successful on the task. Tasks like this align well with the different types of formative assessment we discussed earlier. The task is of a complexity to elicit a variety of problem-solving strategies from a student and to encourage metacognition on the part of the problem solver, possibly leading that student to identify some different strategies that will improve future work. The task can also give teachers a glimpse of students' thought process as they demonstrate understanding of the concept, especially if teachers can observe students as they work on the task. This can be a rich source of information about possible misconceptions, gaps, or misunderstandings that the teacher can then use to plan future instructional moves. Finally, in that benchmarking context, this task can give information on how well the student understands the concepts of center and spread as described by the standards.
Kathy, great. Thank you very much. I think what stood out for me was this idea of focusing on the processes around assessment and the ones that are going to allow the results from assessment to really affect student learning strategies and teachers' instructional moves. So that was great. I want to have a moment to let us answer a second poll question. So for this question, thinking back to the table that Kathy shared, providing a way to categorize assessment, consider the assessment practices in your district and have any of those described as in this poll question here, have any been a particular area of focus for your educators and leaders over the past year? So you can respond by selecting your best choice if there's an area of assessment that you've been focusing on as a system or in professional development. Or if it's appropriate, you are able to select more than one. Okay, super. Thank you. So it looks like one area of focus for our attendees has been looking at their interim or benchmark assessments. And I believe that this leads us nicely into our presentation from our next panelist. Nick Romagnolo from Newark will now share with us some details about the efforts being made in his district to highlight and develop some key assessment practices.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Nick. I'm in Newark Public Schools. My official title is Special Assistant for Pre-K-12 Mathematics. It means I'm the leader of the mathematics work in the district, and I'm just going to give you some ideas of the formative assessment 4 learning work that we've been doing in the last year and a half here in Newark Public Schools as a huge initiative to try and support our students. So the first thing you're going to see is our 5 academic objectives for the district. These have stayed constant last year to this, and we hope that they continue to stay constant as we move forward so that we can continue to focus on and dive deeply into these 5 big ideas. There are actually 10 objectives for the district in general. These are the 5 that specifically and explicitly speak to our academic work. I'll let you go ahead and read through those. As you know, or may not know, New Jersey is a park state, and we have been working hard to help our teachers define Common Core mastery through how our students will be assessed on park. Last year was our first year. All of our students, we're the largest district in New Jersey, and all of our students were required to take the assessments online. So that, as you can imagine, required quite a bit of work, and we are proud to say that we were able to pull that off effectively. The second objective there, we've created year-long instructional plans. Those are scope and sequence documents that try to bring coherence to our teaching, learning, and assessment strategies, which I think is fair to say we've struggled with in the past. The third one there, we have math and literacy blocks, and when we talk about that, we're talking about the length of time spent teaching our math lessons or literacy lessons. Those change depending on grade level, but the idea is to maximize the blocks using resources and strategies as defined by the shifts in Common Core instructional practices. The fourth one there are high leverage instructional strategies. Those are strategies that we're trying to build sort of piece by piece in very specific categories that we can help teachers as they go back to their classrooms when they work with us. We're creating videos of those practices, putting them online, and creating a library of what strategies and instructional practices look like when done effectively in the classroom in Newark Public Schools. We found that when we show instructional strategies from other places, we get some pushback, so we've been building our own so that people can see it happening with our own students here in Newark. And then finally, we know that teachers change their practice when they are coaching one another, when they're supporting one another, and when everybody knows what everyone else is working on. So our strategy has been to support the leaders of teacher teams at the district level and have them go back to their professional learning communities and teach what they learned back at their school to their specific teacher teams. We do that once a month, and we do it, there it is, in specific sort of, I would say we have a focus each time that our teachers come together. Our big focus for this school year is the idea that we should be assessing for learning. Our big focus for last year was let's build academic discourse into all of our classrooms. So that idea of academic discourse is not the idea of everybody needs to be talking all the time. Academic discourse is the idea that we're creating viable arguments, critiquing the reasoning of others. Those are a specific type of PARC assessment item, and it's the kind of thing we want to help our students get good at in the context of their lessons, not try to teach them how to do it after they've learned the math through some kind of test preparation. So we're trying to embed these practices in the work we're doing every day in terms of academic discourse and find out what our students know much more specifically so that we can attend to it quickly. So there you see the 6 pillars of formative assessment that we've been focused on for this school year. We worked on this starting at the beginning of the year, and the reason to work on formative assessment is how nicely it aligns to the focus of last year, which is that idea of academic discourse. The first pillar there, learning intentions and criteria for success, are clarified. The idea and the work we've been doing there is that the objectives in the classroom need to be thought of and presented to students, and students need to know and internalize each day what they're supposed to know, why it's important, and how it fits into a learning trajectory. So teachers are posting things like, what did we do in the past, what are we doing today, and where is this going to lead us in the future, and having students think about that each day through the use of various instructional strategies. The second piece there, all assessments are used formatively. We've been building very specific protocols for people to think about their assessments, whether they are benchmark assessments, interim assessments, midterms, finals in high school. All assessments are used formatively. Students are doing peer evaluation of one another. Students are doing self-assessment of their own learning through very structured protocols that we're teaching teachers that also turn into those high-leverage instructional strategies I was talking about before. Third, this idea of learning is made visual and audible through engineered effective classroom discussions, activities, and learning tasks that elicit evidence of learning. Here's the very specific place where we're saying we want to see your discourse strategies in the classroom, multiple means of representation, multiple means of expression, and multiple means of engagement so that you know what your students know and don't know because you see it and you hear it every day. The fourth there, non-evaluative effective feedback. The idea here is that we're not grading all the time. We're giving feedback, and that goes for both evaluation of teachers and evaluation of students. So how can we give people feedback without evaluating them so that they can improve over time? Building that idea that we're about incremental improvement over time. We don't become great teachers tomorrow. We have to get better, and that's the work of those pulling the teachers together, those leaders who are coming together and then going back to their PLCs to work together on new strategies like giving feedback without evaluating. The fifth one, self-assessment, is used to activate learners as the owners of their peer assessment. Those kind of go together, and those are also involved in those protocols I was talking about where we're using every assessment formatively. Could be exit tickets at the end of a day, could be specific instructional strategies like my favorite no strategy, which is a really great strategy and it's been used really effectively all across our district in all grade levels. That's a video that's on Teaching Channel if anybody wants to check that out. As one example, self-assessment, students are writing exit tickets and then putting them on large stoplights at their doors. That's red, yellow, and green to say, I feel confident, I don't feel confident, or I'm still kind of confused. Peer assessment, students constantly having assessments where they're thinking about how did the person sitting next to me, or how did this group of students do, or how did math on this, what was the math about, and how can we improve our thinking about this big idea mathematically. So again, I talked about this before, and it aligns very nicely with what Kathy was talking about, the idea of embedded preparation for these end-of-year assessment success. Again, we're a park district. It's an extremely rigorous exam. Students have to take it in ways where the cognitive level is very challenging going online. We just had an interim assessment where we saw that by far the lowest % scores that we had across the district, and we're talking like down in the 4 or 5%, was any question that asked answer all that applies. So the idea of multiple answer, multiple choice, we thought, oh, it's because students are only choosing one question, one answer, and we looked into it. Actually, they're choosing multiple answers. The challenge there is they have to get every one of those both right and wrong. It's like 6 questions in one sometimes where we have a true, false, true, false, true, false that we have to go through. So how do we prepare students for that? Not by giving them lots of those questions, but by helping them think this way in an embedded way through rigorous tasks that Kathy talked about, through academic discourse, through reasoning, through critique of reasoning, through thinking through mathematics in a different way, in a connected way, in a way that we can see this Algebra 1 standard, we're going to assess it many, many times over the course of the year, and we're going to assess it in Algebra 2 as well. So that idea of attention to learning trajectories, I spoke already about thinking about objectives in terms of what are we doing today and why is it important in the context of what we've done before and what we're going to do. Teachers are putting that up specifically, making exit tickets about it, asking students to think about it every day so that kids can have that cognitive process of I know where I am, I know where I'm going, and my teacher and my classmates are helping me with the tools to bridge the gap. Second one you see there, students regularly making sense of challenging, connected, group-worthy mathematics. I spoke to that a bit already. One of the ways we're doing that is through the instructional resources that we have adopted, and they're all pretty recent adoptions. We're much more interested in the big ideas of Common Core, this idea that the task has to be worthy of the attention of a group of students, that they have to be focused on important mathematics, not funneled to right answers. Big ideas that are challenging to do, but through specific instructional strategies aligned with the right task, we're helping our teachers little by little improve these practices. Intentional and regular use of academic discourse and literacy strategies. I spoke already a lot about academic discourse. In terms of the literacy strategies, we have 3 specific strategies that we're trying to implement across the district. They're simple, they're easy to use, they're short, and there's a lot of research around them that says these actually work for students who struggle. We feel like we have an opportunity in math class because most of the reading is short to give these as tools to teachers. They become habits for the teachers, sort of simple routines or rituals for the students. And now every time they see some problem in context, one of these challenging group-worthy tasks, they're able to use one of their literacy strategies, which double as discourse strategies. So those are some very specific strategies we're teaching. They triple as high-leverage instructional strategies that teachers are planning for and implementing regularly. We spoke already about the peer and self-assessment. Summative data formatively. So our protocols for students and teachers looking at data together are about peer and self-assessment. They're about metacognition. They're about being researchers in the class to find out what were we thinking and why, and how can we improve our thinking about this big idea mathematically. And then finally, like I was talking about before, we don't want to teach math and then have kids work on dragging and dropping. We want them having these technology-enhanced items in front of them as often as possible as they're learning the mathematics, so that they're thinking of this as it's just a way I get assessed, and not as, oh, now I have to learn this new way to express my reasoning or to express what I know. So we've seen some pretty significant results in terms of teachers buying into some of the resources that we've provided for them to do all of those big ideas that I was just discussing. So we in the high school are using Agile Mind as a core curricular resource, as well as using Agile Assessment to help assess both formatively and summatively. And remember, when I say that, I say it remembering that all summative assessments are used formatively. So we're able to do that because we can get this real-time access to information. We can see our students are struggling with specific big ideas and also with the context of the actual, I guess we'll call it the form of the assessment. So it's online and they're struggling with multiple choice, that kind of thing. But what we've seen is last year, teachers and students who were teaching and learning using this as a core curricular resource and creating Agile assessment items and getting students online via their new Chromebooks, which we purchased a lot of them so that we could pull off Park online. We have an actual tool now in the classroom for students and teachers to be able to use those computers regularly and to use them in a way that's really effective. So we're seeing now clear positive correlations on our online interim assessments that we've given, and some of those we've given through Agile Assessment and some of them through a third-party site. But what we see is that we have positive correlations for usage rates of Agile Mind and Agile Assessment, and we're starting to see end-of-year assessments come back that also show that positive correlation. The other thing we have is teacher buy-in after the first year. So after the first year, we only had 54 regular users of Agile Mind and Agile Assessment. And I think people really saw what they were up against. They really saw what students had to do, what had to know, had to be able to express their reasoning. And they realized, you know what, this is a tool that I have and I should start using it. So we've basically tripled the amount of teachers who are regularly using those resources, the Agile Mind and Agile Assessment resources, to again have rich tasks where they're learning and they're doing technology-enhanced items, all in the context of the math that they're learning and expected to do every day, not as we're going to learn math in one context and then we're going to learn how to take the test in another. We see 4,000 more hours of teacher usage. That's more than double from last year. We have 1,500 more students that are learning and assessing online, that teachers can regularly get this information, use it in their PLCs to create new plans, which is equal to 4,500 more hours of students being online, learning their mathematics, being assessed in their mathematics, working together in math. Sometimes they're doing it in small group instruction, and they're even doing that, that small group work in the high schools. So we have high school teachers now interviewing students, giving them online assessments and asking them to think out loud as they're creating these assessments so that they can use that in the next day to be able to meet the needs of students specifically. So that's a lot that I went through really quickly. I know we have questions here at the end. The last thing to say is that the goal here is not to now change, and we're going to think about some new strategies moving forward. We want to focus and deepen these practices that we're working on so that our teachers can get incrementally better over time. Our students get incrementally better at thinking about mathematics in this way over time. These high leverage instructional strategies, there will be more of them, but we want more teachers to get good at them, to have them be tools in their toolbox that they can pull out at any time, that are habits for them and routines for their students. Continue helping teachers understand the trajectories of mathematical learning, continue helping with this rigorous academic discourse, with literacy strategies to help our kids read and make sense of the math that they're doing, Math Practice Standard 1 specifically, make sense of these challenging problems and then persevere. Continue working with the leaders of our teacher teams, with our vice principals and principals who are evaluating the work that's being done in the school, and then finally, of course, to focus all assessments on what they are for, which is learning. Whether they are assessment of learning or intentionally built assessments for learning, everything is used for learning in the classroom as a high leverage instructional strategy to sort of tie all of these big ideas of the work we're doing together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. The work you're describing in Newark is very exciting, and it sounds like your results so far have been encouraging, so that's excellent. I think we have time for one more poll question, and we will have time, as Nick said at the end, for some question and answer period where we can maybe ask some more questions of Nick and the details of what he's describing. But for now, take a moment to share where you feel like your district is in a process around assessment, or maybe to describe where you see your district headed. Okay, I think we'll give folks a few more seconds to think about maybe the best response you want to give to this question. And so it looks as if folks are on a trajectory where they're starting to use more technology-enhanced item types. And I think that also transitions us pretty well to the next and last part of the webinar. I want to share at this point a tool that is being used, developed by Agile Mind and being used by our partners. Now that we've heard from Kathy and Nick about the research around formative assessment and also what's happening on the ground in Newark, I'm going to share a bit about our work to support formative assessment and hopefully tie it back to what we've been hearing about today. So Agile Mind is a company that offers programs for middle school and high school mathematics and science. And we develop these programs in a close partnership with the Charles A. Dana Center with the aim of providing comprehensive curriculum assessment, professional development, and data and reporting resources designed to improve student engagement, motivation, persistence, and achievement on rigorous college preparatory coursework. We use technology to help educators enact research-based practices for instruction and to help students take ownership of their own learning. So our work in assessment has been funded in part by the National Science Foundation, which has allowed us with our partners at the Dana Center to develop innovative technology-enhanced item types that engage students on meaningful standards-based tasks. And because, as we heard from Kathy and Nick, a key ingredient for effective assessment is the quality of the tasks you provide students on a regular basis, we're very grateful for the NSF funding that's allowed us to focus our efforts on this part of the work. So while the work we do at assessment is embedded throughout our curriculum programs, today I'm going to show you an assessment resource called Agile Assessment that can be used by educators on its own or in combination with our course programs to create assessments for a variety of purposes. So Agile Assessment provides an item repository of over 5,000 assessment tasks at grades 6, 7, 8, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. These items are developed for and deeply aligned to the state and national standards, covering a range of cognitive complexity and difficulty levels that are appropriate for the next generation standards and that help prepare students with the 21st century skills they need. Our Agile Assessment system is designed for flexible use so that educators can create curriculum-based and standards-based assessments for classroom use or for use by teams of teachers or use at the campus or district level. Online test taking is supported by a number of platforms, including desktop and mobile devices. And the automatically scored items allow educators and students to receive data in real time for rapid feedback on the progress of student learning. And we offer professional development to support the use of the data by educators or teams of educators to maximize the impact on instruction and learning. And now I'd like to take some time to show you the Agile Assessment system. As you can see, Agile Mind is a browser-based system. Teachers, students, and leaders each receive a unique username and password. This is a role-based system that will provide different experiences based on your role. So right now I'm looking at a teacher's calendar page. From here, a teacher can navigate to access his or her Agile Mind courses, view reports, or go to create an Agile assessment test. Or the teacher can stay on the calendar page to review the quizzes and assignments active for a class of students this week. I'm going to stay on the calendar page, and from here I'm going to launch an Agile assessment test. So here we see a view of the student test-taking experience, and with the time we have left, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to the types of items available in Agile Assessment. The technology-enabled item types, such as this hotspot problem, provide varied, interesting, and game-like learning interactions that are designed to increase student motivation to engage in the task. We also have short response, fill-in-the-blank type questions, multiple answer, multiple choice, drag and drop questions, interactive graphing type items, and in addition, these novel items that go beyond multiple choice single answer enable you to assess levels of critical thinking and problem solving that require students to demonstrate understanding to the depth and rigor required by the next generation standards. Because test taking is supported in iPad, Chromebook, and Android devices, districts with a one-to-one initiative and new student-facing devices can use them effectively in the classroom or outside the classroom to support test taking and provide that timely, rapid feedback for students and teachers. So as Kathy noted earlier, and Nick, being able to provide feedback to students when it matters most during the course of instruction is one of the critical components of effective formative assessment for learning. So I'm going to finish up now by showing a sampling of the real-time reports available to educators in Agile Assessment. So this is an example of a dashboard-style report for teachers showing the progress his or her class is making today on an Agile Assessment test. So this at-a-glance report supports fast, convenient, intuitive interpretation of the test data and allows the teacher to be responsive to the student needs based on what's happening in their classes this week. These live links open up the individual items. You can see the item metadata. This provides deeper analysis and also shows the alignment to standards. In addition to this report, educators also have access to other reports at the class and student level that show item analysis information as well as performance by standard, curriculum topic, and comparative data for tests shared across the school or district. So here I'm showing an example of an administrator level report. Because this is a role-based system, Agile Mind has reporting available at each level. So students have reports about their own assessment results, teachers, campus administrators, as well as district administrators. This report is an example of a report available to a district administrator. This would be a high-level starting point, allowing the administrator to see how a test is being used across campuses, as well as see some big picture trends in student performance at each school, and also we'll look at the trends broken down by either the standards being assessed by the test or the topics being assessed. And from here, an administrator might choose to run a more detailed report about an individual school showing performance by class, and even if it's desired by individual student. Just to sum up, the data on student test taking can be exported to Excel for easy integration with other systems or additional manipulation. So in summary, I hope to have given you an example of a tool that's being used by our district partners across the country for a variety of assessment needs. The focus today has been on formative assessment with an emphasis on the quality of the tasks, the ways in which the tasks elicit authentic information about what a student knows and can do related to the standards, and the ways in which technology can be used to deliver high-quality, engaging items and a system that can provide timely data to effectively impact instruction and student learning. So we very much appreciate your time today, and I'd now like to open it up for the question and answer period. So I want to remind you, if you do have a question, please type it into the chat area of your GoToMeeting panel, and we will try to take this time to answer as many questions as we can. So here's a question. I think this one is for you, Nick, and the attendee asks, with the focus you're putting on assessment practices in the classroom, have you started to see a difference in your teacher practices and mindset when it comes to assessment?
I think we've seen a change, especially in the people that we've been in front of. The teachers that are those leaders of those teacher teams are starting to really internalize and understand the difference that's necessary. And the difference isn't just about assessment, it's about instruction, really. And so aligning that with our discourse strategies, aligning it with, how do I put it, the bigger ideas of what's necessary, what's implied by the Common Core, by PARC, by the math practice standards, and what we just know to be good mathematics instruction. Those people are starting to get it. In some cases, they've been coming to this Leadership Institute for a year and a half, and they're starting to see the through lines, the connections that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Whether or not that's happening across the whole district is a challenge, and it really depends on the person who's coming to us and taking it back to teach his or her colleagues. We are starting to see different ideas, though. People saying, oh, look, I'm assessing my students' mindsets, or, oh, hey, look, I'm assessing their behavior, in ways that are really, we know to be really effective, and it is changing their mindset around assessment. But it's a slow process, so it's definitely incremental, and we look for those bright spots to show the rest of the district.
Excellent. Let's see, so here's one other question. Can Agile Assessment be used with other curriculum? Is it only with the Agile Mind curriculum? And that's a good question. So while we do have many partners that are using Agile Assessment in combination with the Agile Mind course programs, Agile Assessment is a tool that can be licensed on its own and used by educators to create tests that map to their curriculum or pacing guides. And Kathy, here's a question. Someone wants to know, I think this would be good for you to answer. When reviewing assessment resources, like looking at different tools and resources, how can you tell if the items align with your standards and are worthy tasks?
Well, thanks for the easy question, Elisa. So yeah, that is a great question. So I would suggest that the very first thing you should look at, it may seem obvious, is alignment. And when I say alignment, I would say not a surface alignment, but a deep alignment. If you any standard set you look at now, you have to look at not only what the standard is saying students should understand and know and be able to do, but in many cases how they should be doing it. And so you need to look for tasks that actually allow students to demonstrate their understanding of the content described in the standard in the way that the standard is describing it. So tasks that will elicit a deep level of thinking, tasks that will elicit the kinds of student metacognition and the kinds of engagement that we know are going to be required for students to demonstrate success. So I think, yeah, number one, I guess I would call out alignment, but again, alignment in the ways that I'm thinking about it in terms of deeply following what the standards intend.
Okay, so not an easy thing, but important. I think that I'm getting a cue. So those are the big questions that were coming out of the audience that we wanted to address. And if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank everyone for being with us today. Thank our panelists for taking the time. And I want to be sure to let you all know that if you'd like to learn more about any of the topics covered, please contact us. There's some information here that you can see on your webinar slide about contacting either by email or by phone. So again, a recording of the webinar will be available, and we also welcome the opportunity to talk individually about anything you'd like to discuss in more detail. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a great day.